Have you ever heard a train whistle late at night, so clear it sends a shiver down your spine? It's the kind of sound that lingers in your mind, haunting you, even after the train fades into the distance. But what if I told you there's a train that only runs at midnight? A train that no one remembers boarding and no one ever returns from. This is the story of the Midnight Train, an eerie legend that has haunted the town of Eldridge for generations. Some say it's a ghost train, a relic of the past, cursed by the souls of the forgotten. Others believe it's a doorway to another world, a world where the rules of time and space no longer apply. Let me take you on a journey where the clock strikes midnight and everything you know about reality begins to unravel. This is the tale of the Midnight Train. Listen carefully, for this story might not end the way you expect. It all started on a quiet night in Eldridge, a town that prided itself on its peaceful ways. It was a town where nothing strange ever seemed to happen, until that fateful night. The town was asleep, save for a few late-night wanderers and restless souls. That's when Thomas Grayson, a traveler with no particular destination, arrived at the station. He had been on the road for days, his car having broken down miles from here. He needed a place to rest. As he approached the station, he noticed something odd. There was a train at the platform, even though the schedule clearly stated the last train had left hours ago. The train was old, its iron wheels gleaming in the dim moonlight, its windows dark and empty. There was something unsettling about it, but Thomas wasn't one to question things. He had been on the road too long to care for anything unusual. Curiosity, however, got the best of him. He walked towards the platform, where an old man in a conductor's uniform stood waiting. His face was hidden in shadow, but his presence was commanding, like he had been standing there for centuries. The conductor didn't speak a word, but with a slow, deliberate motion, he pointed toward the train's door. Thomas hesitated for a moment. He was tired, and the idea of a comfortable seat on a warm train was tempting. But as he looked up at the midnight sky, the stars seemed to flicker, almost as if they were trying to warn him. With a shrug, he boarded the train. The door clicked shut behind him, the sound of it echoing louder than it should have. He looked around for the conductor, but the platform was empty. No one else was on the train, just him and the eerie silence. Then, the train began to move. It started slowly, as though it was unsure of its path. The sound of the wheels on the tracks was almost soothing at first, but the further it went, the more unsettling the ride became. The air inside the train was thick and cold, despite it being summer outside. The lights flickered occasionally, casting long shadows across the narrow aisles. Thomas settled into an empty seat, trying to shake off the feeling that something wasn't quite right. He looked out the window, expecting to see the familiar sights of the town pass by. But there was nothing. The streets, the houses, everything had disappeared into a void of dark mist. The train continued onward, but it wasn't taking him anywhere he knew. It was taking him somewhere else, somewhere otherworldly. As the minutes passed, Thomas began to notice something even stranger. He wasn't alone. The other seats on the train, which had initially been empty, were now filled with people. Figures cloaked in darkness, their faces hidden beneath wide-brimmed hats or shawls. Their presence felt heavy, like they were watching him without ever turning their heads. They sat perfectly still, their eyes fixed on the floor or the windows, never acknowledging Thomas's gaze. He tried to speak, but no words escaped his mouth. His throat felt dry, and his heartbeat quickened. He knew knew something was wrong, but what could he do? He wasn't even sure how to get off the train. The train continued its journey, traveling through endless, empty stretches of land. The landscape was barren, devoid of life. The only thing that moved was the train, gliding silently through the night. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, the train came to a screeching halt. Thomas lurched forward, his body jerking with the motion. The lights flickered one last time, and then went out completely. Complete darkness. He could hear the whispers now, soft, indecipherable voices, murmuring all around him. He could feel the cold breath of something unseen against his skin. Then, the door to the conductor's cabin opened. The conductor, the same man who had silently pointed him aboard, stood in the doorway. His face was now visible, though it seemed strange, as if it was shifting. No features were permanent. His mouth stretched into a smile that seemed to go on forever, but his eyes, those cold, empty eyes, never left Thomas. "This is your stop," the conductor said in a voice that sounded like the rustling of dry leaves. The door at the end of the train opened, revealing a swirling vortex of mist and shadows. A passage between worlds, between time. The whispers grew louder, and the faces of the passengers began to shift, their features morphing into grotesque, twisted versions of themselves. Thomas felt his body moving toward the door, his legs no longer under his control. Every step he took felt like a pull toward an inevitable fate. He could hear the conductor's voice behind him, urging him forward, urging him to step into the unknown. But just as his foot touched the threshold of the door, something inside him snapped. He broke free from the trance, pushing back against the pull of the train. With every ounce of strength he ran. The mist seemed to chase him, but he didn't stop. He ran through the train, the faces of the passengers watching him in silence, until he reached the door at the far end. He opened it and jumped. Thomas woke up on the platform at Eldridge station, gasping for breath. The train was gone, as if it had never been there at all. The streets were quiet. The night was still. Was it all just a dream? Or had he truly boarded the midnight train? He didn't know. But one thing was clear. He was no longer the same. The memories of that night lingered, and the whispers followed him wherever he went. Some say the midnight train still comes to Eldridge, waiting for the next lost soul. Others believe it's a passage, a doorway between worlds. And once you've seen it, you'll never forget it. What do you believe? Thank you for taking this journey with me. Remember, if you ever hear a train whistle at midnight, don't follow the sound. Some doors should never be opened.